Greetings everybody. A few months back I made a video about the score for Dune, and I originally intended to include a lot more music theory and show how the different themes use different modes inspired by music from the Middle East. But I realized that that video would be very long if I kept interrupting like the examples from the movies with me sitting down by the keyboard. So instead I decided to do this as a separate video. Because you see, the Dune movies apply a very tried and true Hollywood approach to how to score, exotic Middle Eastern deserty vibes, which could be described as Orientalism, which is not actual Middle Eastern music, but how Western composers think Middle Eastern music sounds. Now, as it happens, one of my favorite music educational YouTubers, feyd-rautha, recently made a whole video on this subject. So if you want to know more, just watch that instead.
So I just wanted to know, so the first scene for the movie, how does the melody go? I wanted the music to sound Middle Eastern, so the melody goes like this. Okay, interesting choice. Hijaz, yeah, the Hijaz tetrachord, sure, that's a mode that we have. It's heard relatively often in our music. How about the next scene, the scene after that, when the hero meets the girl? Okay, Hijaz car again, that's interesting.
And wouldn't you know it, the reason I started thinking about all these things to begin with is because of the Lord of the Rings. Because there's plenty of Middle Eastern inspiration in Lord of the Rings too, like the Lothlorien theme. Let's look at how Doug Adams describes this mode. The music of Lothlorien suggests the Maqam Hijaz, an Arabic mode not unlike the Western Phrygian mode, though with an augmented second between its second and third scale degrees. While certain Maqam Hijaz microtonalities were shed, Shore often stresses the augmented second interval in the Maqam's opening. This interval is used not to invoke an exotic otherness, but to create a sense of age that speaks of Middle Earth's ancient eras. You can tell from that description that Doug Adams is very aware of the history of how this sort of scale is used in Hollywood. I think it really speaks to his integrity that he doesn't actually call the mode a Maqam Hijaz, just a westernized adaptation of a Maqam Hijaz.
For example, you could go for Bayat or Shur. That is the most widely used traditional mode. It's the minor, but the second note of the minor scale is a half flat, a microtonal half flat, so it goes like this. Hear that sound? It's never heard in Western music, and it gives it a beautiful sound. You can go... I could go like that, but I'd rather go like this. Sure, you can just stick to Hijaz Khan for this one too if you want.
The analogy I'd use is with food, like Chinese food. As a Swede, I've grown up eating the westernized, commodified version of Chinese food, what we would call China food. But then I went on a trip to China in 2009 and tried real Chinese food. And it was a hands-on experience on the fact that China food and Chinese food are not the same. So just like how a chef commodifies Middle Eastern food for a Western customer by making it less spicy, a composer commodifies Middle Eastern music by removing those microtonalities.
How about this one could be interesting. This is a microtonal mode that is really, really microtonal. It sounds kind of happy, but then you go down the... Aye, or I could just go like this.
And the thing is, none of this means that Orientalist music is bad. Like, I love a lot of Orientalist music, like the Lothlorien theme or the Music of Dune or Gladiator. This is good music, but we have to be careful to know that it's not authentic Middle Eastern music. Once again, watch Faria's video, but now that we can put all that aside, let's look at the actual scales and modes used in the Dune soundtrack. I have in fact touched on the subject of scales and modes in a previous video. Let's talk about modes. In classical Western music theory, the standard scales are the major and minor. You probably already know the C major and A minor scales since they just use the white keys. But according to modal theory, these are just 2 out of 7 possible modes. You can find the 7 modes by playing C to C, D to D, E to E, F to F, G to G, A to A, and B to B. As you can see, what we call major and minor just corresponds to the Ionian and Aeolian mode. Which is another example of a video where I wanted to go more in depth on music theory of the subject, but was afraid of being too long-winded, so I stripped it down a bit. And unfortunately that means that I kinda gave you the bad introduction to modes. The problem with this explanation is that it doesn't actually reflect how modes are used. Like, I can't think of an example of a song that starts in C Ionian and then moves to D Dorian, or going from E Phrygian and then moving to F Lydian. Now, what you rather see are songs that use different modes that start on the same root note. The better way to explain this is to arrange the modes in order of brightness, starting from the brightest, the scale with the most sharps, the Lydian mode. Then you flatten the 4th to get the Ionian or major scale, which is just slightly darker than Lydian scale. And then we keep going like that. Flatten the 7th to get the mixed Lydian scale. Flatten the 3rd to get the Dorian scale. Then the 6th for the Aeolian or minor scale. Flatten the 2nd for the Phrygian scale. And flatten the 5th for the Locrian scale. And there you have it. If you think of the modes like this instead, you will actually understand how they use the music. If you have a song in D Ionian and want to make it brighter, then you move it up to D Lydian. And if you want to make it darker, you move it down to D Mixolydian. So what we'll do is we'll arrange the modes in order of how approachable and easily digestible they are to the Westerner's ear. So we start with the normal, vanilla major scale and move through the modes into the exotic harmonic scales, and then even further into the non-diatonic weird stuff that sounds off-putting to people no matter where you come from. And you'll see how well this overlaps with the intended impression of the themes in Dune. So first off, the major scale. The themes that use the major scale are the ones that are most closely tied to Paul and his family, like the House Atreides theme. But it doesn't stay in the major scale all the way through. It does use a modal mixture. In the B phrase we start to hear this note, which does not fit into E flat major but in E flat mixolydian. This also relates to the Paul and Chani theme, because as I mentioned in the Dune video, the House Atreides theme and the Paul and Chani theme start on 2 quite different A phrases that then eventually join into almost identical B phrase. And to be even more specific, both these A phrases are not just in the major scale, but in the major pentatonic scale, which is a major scale without the 4th and the 7th, forming a 5-note scale with no half steps. Just 5 simple notes that have been used by musicians and composers all over the world throughout all time. So it gives this anciently pastoral, innocent kind of feeling. Fitting then to use it for themes relating to family and love. And then of course we get that amazing B phrase in A mixolydian. Which occasionally changes those major chords for minor chords with the same function. So still start on A major, but instead of going to G major, we go to E minor. And instead of D major, we go to B minor. Very little change, but it does a lot. Now we have some modal mixture again, because for the first time in the song we use a C natural instead of a C sharp. And ending on that open A for an ambiguous sensation. Is it minor or is it major? We can't tell. The other very familiar, conventionally heroic theme is Duncan's theme, which is literally just the pitches of a major chord. It does however often have a bit more complication, because sometimes it's played like this. Which implies a Lydian mode, which, you know, still works with the character. It's bright, it's heroic, it gives a little tinge of the mysterious too. So we have the minor scale, also known as the natural minor scale, but we also have the harmonic minor scale. Because in Western music theory, the leading tone is very important. It's what allows you to make a dominant progression. So even though the minor scale doesn't have this leading tone, Western composers inserted it anyway, giving you the possibility to use the dominant progression even though we're in minor. And all of a sudden we have a very interesting interval here. These two notes are a minor third apart, but unlike any other scale we see today, they are surrounded on both sides with half steps, creating a very dissonant, odd sound to the Western ear. And it is this tetrachord consisting of a half step, an augmented second, and another half step that Hollywood composers have used since the dawn of cinema to make the audiences go, "Ooh, the desert." The closest to a normal minor modal theme we have is the sorrow theme. But we're still technically not in natural minor, but in harmonic minor, because this progression, an F minor to a D flat minor, doesn't fit into a natural minor mode, but does if you use the harmonic minor. However, sometimes you ought to remember that chords and scales are not necessarily meant to always fit together. This progression is supposed to feel jarring. It's used in a lot of other movies, like the Imperial March from Star Wars. Or in Lord of the Rings with Gollum's theme. In these cases, the point is not to sound coherent like we are in one distinct scale. We're supposed to feel like we're always moving somewhere new. Another theme that uses these chords is the Empress theme that appears in Dune Part 2. You notice how the theme begins in Lydian. Those are all pitches from the Lydian scale. But when it reaches its peak, that's when the chromatic median kicks in. And the last theme that uses these modes is the Phrygian Fremon-ostinato. The Phrygian scale is probably the closest to that exotic otherness among the normal church modes because of that flat second. You can see how easily you can form an harmonic scale just by sharpening the third two, so you get that. This is the Phrygian dominant scale, and that's the thing that I want to talk about now. Because once we leave the normal church modes and start to get into the more harmonic stuff, the most obvious starting point is the minor harmonic scale that we talked about in the beginning. You know, the normal minor scale with a sharpened seventh. And while we don't have a theme that actually uses the minor harmonic scale, we do have a theme that uses a mode of it. The thing is that just like you can take the major scale and form the different modes by starting on the different pitches and forming new scales, you can do the same with these harmonic scales as well. If you take the minor harmonic, but don't start on the root, but you start on the fifth, then you get the Phrygian dominant scale. It's a mode of the harmonic minor scale. And that's where we find feyd-rautha's theme. And finally, we get to a double harmonic major scale, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a harmonic scale, but it's major and it's doubly harmonic. It's just that harmonic tetrachord 2 times. An interesting feature of a double harmonic major scale is that it allows you to play 2 major chords a half step apart, which is basically the core of a Dune theme. And its associated ostinato. You can see how the theme is built around these stable chord tones and these half steps that rub against those chords. Extra point for that half step because this is the minor third, implying an E-flat minor chord going to an E-flat major chord. Another major feature of a double harmonic major scale is the major tonic going to a minor fourth, which you'll find all over the tragic nobility theme. Which leads perfectly into the awe and mystery chords. Note that both the Dune theme and the tragic nobility theme uses a little bit of modal mixture, because the double harmonic major scale uses this C sharp, but at certain points both themes revert to a C natural, which would once again form a Phrygian dominant scale. Notice the cyclical nature of the bass notes in the Dune theme. This implies a progression going from D major to E flat major, back to D major, and up to C minor. Both the Tragic Nobility theme and the Awe and Mystery chords use this as well, the shift from the D major to C minor. And if we look at just the melody, the top note of the Tragic Nobility theme, you can see that we're only moving within these 4 notes, which happen to be the first note of an octatonic scale. Now we're getting into the real weird stuff. An octatonic scale is a scale with 8 notes, and all the others that we looked at so far has been heptatonic scales, scales with 7 notes. And you get an octatonic scale by starting on a root, then going half note, whole note, half note, whole note, half note, whole note, half note, whole note. See, it's just alternating half note and whole notes. So these 4 notes that make up the top line of the Tragic Nobility theme, they sound pleasant because they attach to these very mellow, wonderful chords. But if you take those exact 4 notes and put them in the bass instead, and play them as if they are on the root, then you get a whole different vibe. Which forms the impending doom theme. The reason it feels so dark is for the exact same reason that the different modes feel dark. If you once again remember that the Lydian scale, even lower than 5th, we get the Locrian scale, which is considered the darkest of the normal modes. The octatonic scale takes it even one step further down by lowering the 4th as well. Which means that the impending doom theme doesn't need to do anything else than walk up and down that octatonic scale to get that ominous feeling. But still, amazingly, we haven't actually reached the darkest corners of this score yet. Let's walk it back a bit and talk about Paul's theme. This scale is surprisingly hard to pin down. It does seem to just be a normal minor scale, but with the 4th sharpened, which gives us this augmented second we've been talking about, and also this 5th with those crunchy chromatic neighbors as they're called. But no matter how much I searched on the internet, I couldn't actually find a name for this scale except just Aeolian sharp 4, which sure, it's to the point, but I really expected this to be some kind of harmonic scale. Even just changing the C natural to C sharp would give us the double harmonic minor scale, which I expected it to be at first. But Paul's theme has this very distinct opening here, which is an augmented second followed by half step. And as we remember, an augmented second is the same notes as a minor third, but just labeled different. And the interesting thing is that the Dune ostinato has almost the exact same shape, but with major instead. You see that, right? Like, if I only change this major interval into a minor interval instead, we have basically Paul's theme right there. And towards the end of Dune Part 2, those intervals start to appear in a new theme, the Kwisatz Haderach theme. You hear that? Exact same intervals. And if we take a look at this pitch collection, you know, just these 5 notes that are used in this theme, Those are the exact same pitches that are used in Paul's theme. But not only that, this is technically just the bass line of the theme. We have a melody too that appears at least 2 times in film. You can see it's basically just Paul's pitches over and over. And not only that, this bass line forms like a perfect dark parallel to the Dune theme, since the Dune theme uses D major and E flat major, while this theme implies a D minor to E flat minor progression. Even an E flat minor dominant progression. And what's really crazy is how these different influences to the Kwisatz-Haderach theme also means that it works perfectly in tandem with them. You can play this minor bass line under the supposedly major moded Dune theme. And put Paul's theme on top of that, which I unfortunately do not have the number of arms to perform. As I mentioned in that video, the reason these themes worked well together is because one by one they're actually quite simple. Without any harmonic support, the Dune theme can be in major or minor. There's not enough information from these pitches to determine it. But what the hell are we even gonna call the scale implied here? Give it up to me to always make this stuff about Lord of the Rings, but it's almost the exact kind of half octatonic, half harmonic minor scale that Bear McGregor used for the Sauron theme in the Rings of Power. At this point, I'm not even gonna bother to try to find what kind of scale this is, because that's not really how I think about it. This is one of those moments where just thinking about scales and modes might actually make it less intuitive for you. Because just like we went over with the chromatic median progressions, the point isn't to be easy on the ear. I'm completely fine with not figuring out a name for this scale, because it's just the pitches you get when you put a D minor chord followed with an E flat minor dominant chord. And from there the Kwisatz-Haderach theme emerges. And this is the bottom. You do not get any darker than this. Like, I really can't even play how dark it's supposed to be because I can't go any. Even if I pitch shift this down, I can only play like the top 3 notes of that theme. We've gone from the tranquil, pastoral, pentatonic down to the... So in conclusion, even though I think it's entirely justified to criticize Hans Zimmer for reusing the same Orientalist tropes instead of taking inspiration from actual Middle Eastern music, I hope I've proven that the score has a lot more thought put into it than just generic desert vibes. Because once again, this is beautiful music to me. It is engaging and tickles my imagination, but I just want people to be very aware of the fact that it's not authentic Middle Eastern music. So on one hand, I will not hold him personally accountable for just sticking with the trend, but on the other hand, it still does tickle the imagination to consider what a Dune score could have been like if it had incorporated more actual Middle Eastern inspirations.
I could go like that, but I'd rather go like this.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and a special thank you to my new patrons, Julian Dubois, John H. Martin, Aidan Lackeray, Rodrigo Paixão, and Richard Saucedo, for supporting me and my creative efforts. If the rest of you want early access and exclusive content, then sign up you too. This was my first attempt at making a more or less unscripted video to make myself more comfortable talking to a camera. Now, have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one.